Our Golden Girls theme. Laverne and Shirley theme. Welcome to the Friendzy.
Hi, I'm Melissa Carter.
And I'm Jen Hobby.
And here is our promise to you. The Friendzy is here to change the conversation around age
so that you can celebrate all your years rather than lie about them.
We celebrate real stories by real women in the hope that you will share your story too. I'm Melissa, and when I was in the first grade, I got in trouble for talking, and the teacher made me wear a mask over my face with a big tongue, and it said something embarrassing like I can't stop talking. Something that would never fly today. Never happened today. I got shamed.
That's a shame monger in school.
Yeah, so Miss Stone, I have been talking for a living, so thank you very much. Whatever.
Oh,
it's true.
Dagger.
It was awful. Yeah, it was awful.
I'm Jen Hobby, and I forget to finish my sentences with the last two words, just like my mother does. So instead, I'll use words like thingy or whatchamacallit.
Whatchamacallit is the ultimate old person word. Right?
Honey, over there, can you go get me the the thingy? The whatchamacallit,
no.
I can't find the last word. I am so my mother.
That is hilarious. And do you get mad about it when you're done? Like, I can't believe it.
Oh, I really need to find those last couple of words in the sentence.
That is hilarious. All right. Well, coming up on today's episode, you're going to hear our extraordinary stories of how mothers move mountains.
Yes, Mother's Day was yesterday, and we've got some reflections and stories for you about our mothers, their mothers, and our own roles as mothers.
That's right. Plus, we both have a pep talk that will relieve you of your mom guilt, because we're going to do a back then versus now. How it was. What is it on social media? It's like how it was and how it's going or something. So we're going to talk
started,
how it started, how it's going. That's exactly right. Because we're going to talk about your childhood as opposed to how you mother. And it's going to be pretty hilarious.
And let you let go of that guilt, right?
And yes, that's
y'all, we got it way harder. Way harder.
Yes, as a kid, yes, we survived a lot.
All right, we want to ask you, have you subscribed to the Friendzy podcast yet? Why not? It's totally free. If you have already subscribed, thank you so much. And we want to know, could you share and tell a friend about the Friendzy? We would appreciate it so much. It allows us to get in front of more women because we want more women to hear these real stories connecting real women.
Mm-hmm.
And Melissa, we're going to share some of our own stories here coming up in just a minute. But first, let's thank our sponsor.
Kick It Pajamas.
All right. If you get your Kick It pajamas, then make sure you use the code Friendzy for a 10% discount.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. If you're watching the Friendzy on YouTube, and if you're not, you can always go to YouTube and you can search the Friendzy. But I want to explain before we get into our mother's stories, or this is kind of a mother story. But so this is the first year that for Mother's Day, I have a tissue ready, Jen. I have a tissue ready, but this is the first Mother's Day I don't have Millie Pete. And so for our Mother's Day episode, I wore, let's see if I can do it, Eastern Kentucky Colonels.
Aww.
So that's where my mom went to college. We were a big college family, everybody competitive about colleges. She went to Eastern Kentucky, University of Richmond, Kentucky, near UK. My father went to UK. And so I wore this today. And the reason this t-shirt is special, and I have it, is because Mom passed away last year, not from COVID. I don't know why. Again, I always have to give that disclaimer, but because she passed of old age. So she was 91 years old. But we have yet to have a funeral for her because it's in the middle of the pandemic. And so I bought this shirt because I'm like, this is what I'm going to wear to her funeral. And so, I mean, I'll dress it up with a black jacket and black slacks. But I'm like, she was so proud to go to Eastern Kentucky University that I have this t-shirt on today. And then the other thing I have on is a paper white rose that I drew and cut out quickly from my son's art supplies, because I couldn't find a white rose yesterday. But in my church growing up on Mother's Day, everybody wore roses on their lapels. And it was a red rose if your mother was still living, and it was a white rose if your mother was not living. And I remember that my grandmother passed away before I was born. So my father always had to wear a white rose. And I remember how sad I felt for him and dreaded that. And so this is the first year that I would wear a white rose if I was still there. So the white rose is in honor of her as well. So
What a
we're starting
beautiful
off
tribute.
starting off crying. But if you're watching on YouTube, I wanted to explain. It literally is a paper rose that I taped to my shirt. But because I'm not out and about and going to florist yet, but it's just one of those things that I remember from childhood, from Mother's Day, is the church service on Mother's Day. And everybody, and I would, as a kid, I would look around and look at the symbol, and I could tell who still had their moms and who didn't have their moms. So it was one of those childhood memories that stuck with me. So I'm honoring her
That's
today with that
beautiful.
one.
And that's why those kind of traditions are so special, because that's
Mhm.
something that you have lived with your whole life, knowing that that was how everybody honored their moms. And oh, so beautiful.
Yeah. So
Oh,
anyway,
that's sweet.
I wanted to start, jump off talking about that
Yes. Well, I want to talk about how mothers move mountains. And I specifically want to talk first about Millie Pete.
Mhm.
And I want to ask you about a favorite moment you can remember with your mom and
Mhm.
why that time was so special.
Well, it's going to be an odd. I mean, there's so many special moments with
Of
my
course.
mother.
I know it's hard to narrow down.
But I'll tell you one that was really memorable. That was an enlightening moment with my mother. So I was with Katie Joe at the time, and it was during the time we were on the morning show we were on, and we went to Gatlinburg. And we decided to take my mother. My brother was there as well. So the four of us were spending a weekend in Gatlinburg. And it was fun to have the four of us. My mother loved Katie Joe, and Katie Joe loved my mother. So it was nice. Again, my mother's very accepting of who I was and always has been. And so we were on this trip, and somehow we got in the conversation of Walt Disney World. And I had gone when I was 7 with my whole family. And somehow in the conversation, my mother revealed that, well, you realize that I'm the one that paid for that trip. And I was like, no, I don't know the story behind that. So apparently Walt Disney World had just opened a few years before we went. And my father didn't want to take the family. For some reason, my father didn't want to spend the money on it. And specifically for me, my mother, because she had grown up with her generation was actually the first Disney kids. And so
Mm.
she'd grown up with Disney and Mickey Mouse, and she wanted to take her children, especially her youngest child, to Disney World. And so I remember as a kid, my mother, who had retired from teaching at that time, getting a job at the Belk store in town. And she was, and I just remember it being because she was bored and wanted to do something. But I learned on that trip to Gatlinburg that it was because she was saving up money to take me to Disney World. And so she told me that story. And I just remember thinking the sacrifice she made. Her
Mm.
husband didn't want to pay for it. She didn't have a full-time job. And so here's a retired woman who did that specifically to take us to the park. And I was shocked because I didn't know that. And I was so grateful that
Mhm.
she shared that story with me so that I could fully appreciate what already was a wonderful trip. That's one of my favorite memories. But the fact that she worked and sacrificed to make sure that that happened was something that, yeah. So when you say,
It made you appreciate it in a whole new light.
yes,
Like all of a sudden these years later, the story gets more color and it has another chapter to it. And you're like, wow, not only did I love that trip, now I get that trip and what
right,
it meant to her. Think
right.
about that too. All those hours that she put in at Belk working and saving up and all that
And
time and all that
standing up if you
planning.
do retail and dealing with customers and
Yeah.
and being on your feet all day and
And then to think about all those conversations with your dad that happened behind the scenes where he was like, I don't want to spend the money on it. That's a ripoff or whatever he thought. Like,
right,
for whatever reason, he didn't want to go or spend the money on it. And then probably going head to head over whether they were
exactly.
going to go or not. And she's like, well, you know what? It means so much to me. I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's
yeah. So
amazing.
that is, there's so many memories, but that's the one that I was like,
Like, whoa.
I was shocked. So what is your favorite moment that you can remember with your mom?
So many, like you said. My mom, Nancy, is now a best friend, and she always has been. I just haven't always been that best friend back to her, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
I was thinking of a couple of different memories. The first is a car conversation. And I will say to all the moms, and I'm going to do this as a mom when my kids become teenagers, put them in the car and just drive somewhere, right? Turn the
Mhm.
radio off, turn your podcasts off, turn all the screens off, and just talk, because it was like the little confessional. My mom would put me in the car and I'd just tell her all kinds of things. Okay. So there were a couple car conversations that I remember. And one of them was when I revealed to her that I had first had sex.
Whoa.
And I remember
Whoa.
being so scared to disappoint my parents. I think I lived a lot of my life afraid I was going to somehow disappoint them. And when I finally revealed to her and told her the truth about what I had experienced, she was so empathetic and compassionate. And it was the opposite reaction. Now I'm going to cry,
Mhm.
of what I had expected. You know, I had expected to get in trouble for that.
Yeah.
I had expected to disappoint her. And she was so loving and embraced me and said, it's time to go to the doctor. You know, I mean, she
Yeah.
was very much like let's talk about it. And we did. And she just was so warm. And it was one of those God, we're going to cry through this
I
whole
know the whole
episode, aren't
thing.
we?
I guess.
My Lord. But it's just like her ability to be compassionate in that moment of vulnerability really helped me be who I am, which is a more empathetic, vulnerable, sensitive person. I think had she handled that conversation in any other way, or had I gotten in trouble, that could have like locked me away
Yeah.
forever. Do you
I
know what I mean? It's
Yes,
like,
because I can
whoa.
imagine the stress in the sitting in the car. Like I'm empathizing with that stress sitting in that seat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important point for every mother out there to understand. And you said this so brilliantly in another show about how the mothers are the emotional leaders of their
Leaders.
families.
Yes.
And so here she is being empathetic and being the emotional leader of that family. And, one of the things I say to Mr. Carter, because I'm a girl and I don't know, and haven't dated boys. And my brother was older than me, so I didn't see him go from childhood
Mhm.
into teenage years. So I don't know what to expect. I know that they usually become very closed and don't talk very much. But I've tried to plant the seed with my son that if you tell me the truth, you won't get in trouble. And it's for that
Mhm.
story that you just told. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
saying it because I could care less what he gets in trouble for at 6 years old. I mean, I do, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm saying those words because I want him to be able to tell me at 16 what's going
Yes.
on, because
What's really going on?
I'd rather him at least come to me for something, whether it's drugs or sex or whatever the issues will be in 10 years, and get advice from me rather than get advice from another 16-year-old boy. And so I appreciate that story because I'm trying to let my son understand that there are some things you won't get in trouble for. And like you said, I don't want him to obsess with, am I going to, is mom not going to love me anymore? Because I also said that to him a
Right.
lot, is there's nothing,
Right.
absolutely nothing you could do that would keep me from loving you.
Right.
So, because coming out as gay and you talking about sex for the first time as a girl, because, boys have this, oh, yeah, you're a man now. Where a girl, it's like, oh, you're a slut, you're a whore because you had sex. Like there's so many things
There's
revolving usually about
right.
sex
So much
that is so
judgment around it.
yes, it's so
Yes.
stressful. And to be able to have your parent, your source, love you, like you
Mhm.
said, is so impactful. So yeah, I think parents should really choose the battle of what you're going to let your children get in trouble for, you
Right.
know?
And it was one of those conversations that really was shaping
Mhm.
for who I am. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to her and how she handled it in the moment. And I will say those car confessionals, use it, right?
Mhm.
Because you're not facing each other, right? It's not an intimidating thing. Like you're looking forward, just the position
Yeah.
of sitting in the car. You're looking forward, she's looking forward, but you can have conversation and you're not having to look each other in the eye, because I might have
Right.
chickened out on telling her, but I didn't chicken out. I told her, and the way that it went was awesome. Other car conversations of us, driving to go shop for my first suit because I was going through sorority rush at college, and we took
Mhm.
a special trip all the way up to Atlanta from Florida to go shopping.
Fancy.
And
Yep.
a lot of those conversations in the car are some of my most favorite memories with Nancy.
Oh,
Love you,
Nan.
Mom.
Love Nan.
I
She's
know.
awesome.
I know. She is the best.
Now, speaking of Nan, how do you understand your mom better now than that you are a mother? Because that's something that mothers
Oh,
always, oh, you just
wow.
wait till you're a mom, and now you're a
And now,
mom.
yes, exactly. So I think what I understand about my mom more now that I am a mother, and this has just come in the last year during the pandemic and just the stressful time that it was for my family now with my husband's job as a school superintendent. It was an incredibly difficult pressure cooker time. And still having, two small kids at home and all the things. I look back on the way my mother smoothed things over. Now, my
Mhm.
mom is a middle child, right? So that's the peacekeeper in the family,
Yeah.
the birth order, right? So she's going to come by that naturally. But she also smoothed things over a lot in our family growing up, whether that was me being a bratty teenager or my brother always forgetting to put his napkin in his lap and my dad getting mad about the manners. Or, my dad was much more of the disciplinarian. And he led in the way I'm sure his family led, or he saw his father lead.
Mhm.
And he parented in a more disciplinarian way. And because that caused conflict, and my mom's the peacekeeper and uncomfortable with conflict, she spent a lot of time smoothing things over.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I'm embarrassed to admit it, I saw that as a weakness for a long time. And I thought, why doesn't she stand up for what's right? This isn't right, or I'm right, or Matt's right, or dad's right, or you're right, and he's wrong. And what I know now, after now 10 years in a successful marriage,
Mhm.
that's another show for the
That's right. We'll talk about
right.
that
That's
stuff
another
too.
one.
Yeah.
But in my marriage with Grant, what I have learned is that it's not about who's right and wrong. And it is about caring for one another and loving each other through it, whatever it is that you've got to go through. And now I can look back on those moments with my family that my mom smoothed things over and see it as a strength because she knew all the things that were going on behind the scenes that me as a kid, I couldn't have known.
Right.
Right. And I compare myself to that now. I can see my husband's stress. I can see what's going on in the world. I can see the 30,000-foot view that my kids can't see. Right. And I have spent some time in the last year loving us all through it, having more patience than I thought I ever could because of my mom. So I don't know that I'm telling the story very well, but I want to
I
say
think
that
you are.
when I look back on my mom smoothing things over, she gave us a happy home with a strength of foundation and a strength of being able to take that foundation for granted. It's like my parents'
Mhm.
marriage was strong. She kept the family together. She kept us positive and happy. She didn't dwell on the little things. She didn't have to be right. She had to have her family stay together and be happy.
Well, it's like
And
a house. It's like a house. You don't think about your foundation. You don't think about redecorating your foundation, but it's
right.
there constantly, consistently to hold the house up.
Yes. And so I see that so differently now as an adult and as a mother than I did as a kid. So I think her ability to let things go, it conflict and stuff just rolls off her. She doesn't hold on to things. She's not a what's the word for it? Like somebody who just like holds on to every argument you've ever had and then when
Holds a
you get
grudge. She doesn't hold a
she's not a
grudge.
grudge holder. She
Yeah.
lets it go. She's a very forgiving woman. And I see that as such a strength now than when I was a younger woman.
Yeah.
So
No, I
I've
get
learned a
that.
lot. And
I
how
get
about
that.
you? Now that you are a mom, how do
Mhm.
you understand your mom better?
Um, I think that, paying attention to your child for who they are,
Mm.
because I think my mother held a lot of mom guilt with her first 2 children, my 2 siblings, because my 2 siblings are like a decade older than I am. I was the oops
Mhm.
baby, the blessing that they would say. They always
The
hated me saying the
happy
oops be yeah. No,
surprise.
they didn't expect me. I was oops. I think she even laughed at because she had me at 41, then I beat her because I had my son at 44, but she had me at 41, and so and this is back in 1970, so nobody, she was not the norm where now I'm not odd out.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. That was really late back in the day
yes.
that you were born. Yeah.
Yes, and so she had 2 children already who were, much older and laughed at the in the doctor's face, I think. But I think she held a lot of mom guilt for those 2 children, because I think there was a perfectionism in her, but there was also this artistic, free spirit that I think she always tried to contain. And so there was a lot of conflict. I just sensed a lot of inner conflict in my mother, and I think that my humor, even though my father's was a very funny guy, so it was the combination of the 2 of them, the mimicking of my father's personality, very joyful, boisterous, funny guy, and wanting my mom to be happy. And
Mm.
so I always tried to make her laugh, because I could tell that she was unhappy sometimes with that mom guilt. But I
Mhm.
think what I learned from her was the fact that she decided she was going to do things differently with me.
Mm.
And she retired from teaching early so that she could raise me as a stay-at-home mom, because she didn't do that with her first 2 children. And I think what I learned from her is that she just paid attention to me. Like, she had, I think, tried to come down really hard on her older, and this may be something that every baby experiences in the family, but for me it was extreme, where it was, I want to try to do this differently. I want to not come down so hard on her, and I want to pay attention to what she's interested in and not force things on her. And so I do the
And
same
she
thing with Mr.
was
Carter.
wiser,
And she
older,
was wiser. She was an older, what, she was over 40, and she was wiser and knew,
and
yeah,
intentional.
and
It
intentional.
sounds to me like, when she first started her family, it was like, well, this is what you do. You start a family, you do all the things, and you teach and you juggle and and then as she got her happy surprise, her blessing, she thought,
Good.
I'm older, wiser, and now I have a chance to do this intentionally,
Yeah,
which is so
yeah.
cool.
And I think, yes, and she took the opportunity to do that, and I appreciate the fact she took the opportunity to do that. And that's why when Katie and I decided to have children, and it was 1 child, as older parents, I was completely comfortable with that idea, because I was raised in that environment, and I feel very comfortable in it, and I feel very confident in the way that I'm handling Mr. Carter, because I'm handling him the way that she handled me.
Mhm.
And I saw how she tried to keep up with the Joneses, do what her family expected, do what the society expected with her first 2 children, and then relaxed with me. And so, going back to what we always talk about on the Friendzy, is that she gained the understanding that she doesn't have to care what other people think. She can do it the way she feels is right. And it ended up being, in my, I'm biased, but in my opinion, it was the better way from my observation. And that, like I said, it's a model for me and how I handle my son.
And what I
Um,
love about that is that you realize it now and can apply it in your life. What
mhm.
a blessing that is.
Yes.
Isn't it great to be over 40? I
It's
love it.
fantastic, and
I love it.
I don't even know if she was able to get to the point of being as confident as we are, right? Because
Mhm.
we have more freedom to be badass older women, where she was just, I think, just following her gut and doing whatever she thought made her happy. I think she got tired of not being happy,
Mhm.
and so I'm grateful to have had a hand in that.
Okay, another question for you
Yes, yes.
about how mothers move mountains. How, did your grandmother shape your story? And was your grandmother's, or I guess grandmother or grandmothers, shaping your story through your parents, or did they shape your story directly?
It was through my parents, because my father's mother was already gone by the time I
Mm.
was born, like I mentioned, and my mother's relationship with her mother was more strained than her relationship with her father. So, I did not have much influence of grandparents, because my parents moved away from their families to pursue their dreams. So the answer to the question is, um, my parents, who again were born in 1927 and 1929, came from conservative backgrounds in Kentucky. Both came from farm land, and my mother's father owned a general store. I always think of him as like Mr. Olson from Little House on the Prairie, probably a little more
Yeah.
modern than that. But my grandfather owned that general store in town that everybody came to. And my grandmother was the postmaster. Let me add this. Before she had
Wow.
the right to vote, my mother was the postmaster general in that town that my grandfather owned the store. So my grandmother was a professional, and before she had, before society honored her. And I think that they gave my mother the strength to pursue her dreams. And my father, by contrast, pursued his dreams because he was afraid to be stuck in the tobacco farm life. And so the two of them, I think, related on that. And they moved. My father was in the military, and they had the chance to move to Hawaii. And then they came back and they moved in different places. So what I learned from my grandmothers, one by example and one not by example, was to pursue your dreams and to take stock in what you believe in, and dedicate yourself to that. So if it is to move away from your family, which is what I did, I didn't stay in Tennessee, and my siblings did. And so it's to not feel guilty or this family obligation to be in a place that doesn't make you happy. And so that's what I learned from them through my parents.
Isn't it interesting that you're similar to not only your mother, but your grandmother?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of generational influence is fascinating to me.
Let me say, and I know this is a Mother's Day special, but this is in honor of my grandmother, and let me brag on my father for a second, because I always thought this was so, charming's not the word. I thought it was so impressive. My father never once referred to my mother's parents as anything but Miss Martha or Mr. Fred. He always showed respect, and I always just found that so incredible, because nobody else was doing that. So when I think of my grandmother, my mother's mother was named Martha, I think of Miss Martha, because my father was very strict about respect. And so, and that's something that, it's something that kids pick up on. So it's worth, as parents, to think about that as you're addressing grandparents or great grandparents in front of your young children, because they pick up. I mean, I never said anything, so they didn't know I was paying attention, but I always loved when we visited to hear my father address them that way.
That is so Southern gentleman. I
it's
love
so
it.
Southern gentleman.
So
Exactly.
Southern.
Yes.
I love it. I love that. Well, my grandmother's Dorothy Constance. Yeah. And so her nickname was DC. And then my cousin was born first and called her Dee Dee. So Dee Dee was very close to all of us, to me and my brother and my cousin Casey. And I can't hardly say her name without crying, because we still miss her so much.
Yeah, Dee Dee. She was fantastic.
And
fantastic. She's still around.
I know. I have a picture of her in my, on my dresser. I see her every day as I get ready, and I feel like she still is a guiding force in my life. My goodness, I am really going to try to get through stories without crying. But Dee Dee, I think most of all, taught me to do it yourself. She's a do-it-yourself woman, okay? And this is our family's very favorite story about Dee Dee. Although there are a million like this, this is the biggest big fish Dee Dee story. Okay. So she raised her family in Florida. She got divorced when my mom was in high school, which it was very rare back then.
Yes.
Going through a divorce. She had 3 daughters and was still, taking care of business, and taking care of everything. And she decided in Florida, this is just too hot. I really wish I had a swimming pool. And then she looked into it and she's like, well, I can't afford a swimming pool. I'm single mom, still paying for everything. Can't afford a swimming pool. She's like, you know what? I'm going to build it. My grandmother built herself a swimming pool.
Atta girl.
She dug it with her own hands and her own shovel. And by helping out a neighbor who had this kind of, equipment, construction equipment, she, did him a favor and recovered his furniture for him. So he let her borrow this. And she elicited her network to help her out. But that woman dug a hole in the back of her yard and poured her own dang cement.
That is great.
She figured it out. She figured out how to coat the cement, how to paint it, how to put it all together by herself.
Wow.
And guess what? She had a swimming pool and she was in it every day.
That a girl. I
Yeah.
love that.
Isn't
Love
that
that story.
phenomenal? And I remember growing up going to her house and we were always in the swimming pool. And in Florida, that's year round, right? Let's
Yeah.
be honest, it's 12 months out of the year that you can go swimming in Florida. And so it's just something that has always stuck with everyone in our family. Is that, we've talked about it on the Friendzy before. No one's coming to save you.
That's right.
You want something done, then you find the way to go do it. And
That's right.
that improved her life so much. She enjoyed it. She loved it. She was proud of it. She took care of it.
And she
And
deserved it. That's the
it
thing.
wasn't a burden. It was not a burden. Her going
Yes.
outside to, do the chemicals and measure this on the water, make sure it was perfectly crystal blue and crystal clear was a joy for her because from the ground up, day after day, she believed, she wanted it, she desired it, and she went out and did it herself.
She did it. She appreciated it. And that's the thing too, is like she knew she deserved a pool and she was going to find a way for her to get a pool. And that's like you said, nobody's going to say, if you feel like you deserve something, then give it to yourself. Why not give it to yourself and find a way? Because a gift, it's kind of like, don't be embarrassed to throw your own birthday party.
Yeah.
For a long time, I never thought it was okay to throw my own birthday party. And then like, well, shit, yes, I'm going to throw my own birthday party because I want a birthday party. So
I want to celebrate. Yeah, exactly. And I think, that's always, the whole thing has just always stuck with me that she didn't just spend beyond her means, right? It wasn't like a flippant desire and she went into some crazy amount of debt. It's like she just figured out a way to do it. Love it.
Hard work. If you've ever shoveled, that's hard work.
Yes.
So how are you just like your mom? Let's go back to moms. And how are you different? How are you like Nan and how are you not like her?
Okay. Let's see. I think I am like her in the way that I am optimistic. My mom has a sunny disposition, and I'm very glad that she gave that to me because I do feel like I wake up every day pretty optimistic, or I'll look at a situation optimistically, and I owe that to my mom. I am different, and this is not a good thing, because I can be critical. I can be very critical of others and critical of myself. And my mom is not that way. My mom is very loving and accepting of everyone. She's very selfless. And I'm more perfectionistic. And that makes me critical because I am that way internally to myself. And I have a high expectation of others. And I try to get better at that.
See, I like the vulnerability. I mean, you're human, right? You're human. And that could be a little bit of your father's influence because like you said, he was a stickler for things. So
yes, I'm definitely half and half.
Yeah. I think
How about you?
I'm like Millie Pete in no frills. I'm a no frills girl. I don't like complaining. I don't like drama. If you want to do drama around me, I can't do it. Like it has to be constructive. Like I am no frills. I'm also an easy girlfriend. I really don't expect a lot. I just expect compassion and kindness and consideration and respect of my time. Like I'm just no frills, just like Millie Pete. I think the way I'm not like Millie Pete, and I don't know if I've shared this on the show, but I recently was going through some old books and old scrapbooks, and there in it was an email from her that I'd saved that said, do what you love and hire out the rest. And I didn't follow that advice when she gave it to me. I don't know why, but I took that clipping and I put it in my closet just to remind me. So I think the way I'm different from her, she did everything. She cooked and she cleaned and she picked up the kids and she was responsible for the kids and she did everything. 3 homemade meals a day. Like she worked her butt off in the kitchen and she made clothes when we were young. So in elementary school, there were clothes that she had made, some of the shorts and the shirts that she made. She loved doing patterns and stuff. So she did everything. And I think that as she got older and wiser, because when she sent me that email, she was older. She's probably in her 60s, 70s at the time. And so I live by her example. So I'm different than her through her, which is I don't have to, we've talked on the show before. Like I've had housekeepers since our conversation. Now that I'm vaccinated, so I'm no longer cleaning my own house, and I
Yes.
have looked into
Yes, girl.
I've looked into laundry services, and I've looked into. I
Yes.
mean, I don't want to do it, and if I don't want, I don't need to do everything, and I don't want to do everything anymore. I don't have anything to prove, and so that's how I'm not like her as a younger as a mother of a younger kid, but it's through her example that I learned to not be like her. If that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
like with Mr. I don't want Mr. Carter to be like me. I want him to be better than me. And I
Mhm.
think that mom wanted the same thing. So here
Okay,
I
you
am.
ready for the next question? This one is going to be a challenge. And for our friends listening to the Frenzy, I want you to answer this about yourself as well.
Okay.
What kind of mom are you? And what kind of mom do you strive to be? Deep breath.
It goes back to, and no disrespect to Katie, what I'm about to describe, because Katie listens and she knows, and we have a great relationship as partners in crime with our son, and we respect each other's mothers. And one of our agreements was to never criticize the other, mothering skills, because that's the core of who we are. So like, it's hands off of criticizing that part of our lives, and we've stopped criticizing the other parts. I mean, we every now and again we get in a little tiff, but it's never about being a mother.
Mhm.
um but I will say that the mother I am is going back to what I said earlier, which is I pay attention to Mr. Carter. I just watch him. I have no expectations of him beyond who he is. I'm not trying to make him into me. My interests, I do not push upon him. My desires, I do not push upon him. I simply follow his lead. That's what I do. And I think that Katie and I have conversations about that, because it's not necessarily Katie's style of parenting. Um,
Mhm.
but I am the mother who, I'm going to, I'm trying to learn the tools in his toolbox. And then it's my job to get better tools of the same kind, to make sure that his toolbox, he can use that toolbox to the best of his ability. I don't want him to be like any other kid. I don't want
Mhm.
him, and and I don't care what other people think about him. I know that nobody loves him as much as Katie and I do. I mean, nobody gives a shit about your kids other than you. So all the people who post about their kids on social media, it's wonderful, and I love that. But don't get fooled into thinking anybody feels the same way about your kid as you do. They don't think they're as beautiful as you do. They don't think they're as talented as you do or smart as you do, and that's okay. That's your job as a mom. Um, but I think that my goal for
And
Mr.
the
Cart
result of that is lots of not very attractive baby pictures all over the
there are
place.
some people I see with kids that I'm like, honey, they're not anything like you think they are, but that's okay. That's your job as a mom. You're supposed to think they are.
Right, we are.
Yeah. And if you think that about I don't post anything about my son, but if you ever see my son, then keep your opinions to yourself, because to me he's the most beautiful man that's ever been created. So,
Of
um,
course.
but that's my job. I mean, and that's how it should be. I think that's how it was meant to be. I think that's how God or whoever your source is created it to be. That's the beauty of being a mother. And so I
Mhm.
think a mother's, my ability as a mom is to, again, pay attention. What kind of mom do I strive to be? A far more patient mom. I
Mm.
I have a short fuse, and I try my best not to let Mr. Carter see it, but he has seen it, because I mean, I do think that fear is a useful tool in parenting, and I'm certainly not the parent who thinks that a discipline of a child is not important. I do.
Mhm.
But and I came from the paddling, pick your switch kind of
Yeah.
family, and with loud voices and a lot of banging, and um, so I think each generation tries to polish that into something a little better. So what mom do I
Mhm.
strive to be? Is somebody that he sees as a rock, an emotionally stable rock, instead of somebody who is on the verge of losing her temper all the time. And I'm
Mm.
afraid I'm not there yet. But that's how I'd answer that question. So
Mhm.
what kind of mom are you, and what mom do you strive to be?
I think I'm a work in progress mom, like you were saying. I try to get better at it every day. But I will say, I think I am a empathetic mom. So I feel like I try to get to the root of what's going on with my kids rather than just in times of conflict or strife or difficulty, just treating the situation or the behavior. So I feel like, especially in the last year through this pandemic and everything else, that I've tried my best to be the empathetic mom and say things like, I can see that you are feeling very disappointed. And let's talk about the root of it. And so that's where I feel like I'm still a work in progress, but I feel confident in my parenting skills because I show that empathy. And my husband has said to me several times in difficult moments with our kids, because they're still young, they're 8 and 5. And so he'll say, I'm trying to channel you. Like, or he'll say, channel Jen, channel Jen, channel. And I'm like, oh, good. That means that I am at least providing enough of an example of empathy and patience that he can try to follow it. Because I don't want a household of yelling. I don't think anybody likes to be yelled at. I don't like to be yelled at. So I don't want to yell at my kids. Sometimes raising your voice is what we go to, right? That's this instinctual or learned behavior that we immediately go to yelling because we're going to get their attention and like make them shape up and,
Yeah.
ship up or what's the thing?
Shape up or ship out.
Shape up or ship out, right? Like we're gonna lay down the law. But I'm really trying to be an example of patience and empathy and working through the root of what's going on versus being quick to do that. So I feel like that's the part that I'm getting better at and I feel confident in.
And I want to jump in real quick because I mentioned Katie Jo a minute ago. Like, when you talk about you and your husband and in the same house raising your child, Katie and I are doing this solo in 2 different homes, but
I can't imagine that challenge.
And, and I mentioned earlier about how we don't argue about our mothering, but we come from 2 different perspectives on how to mother him. And I will say it is such a relief to be in a relationship, even though we're not together and we're not romantic and we're not in love with each other anymore, but to be in a situation where I don't worry about him when he's with her. Because even though we're 2 different parents, my hope for my son is to be the hybrid of the 2 of us. I don't want him to be me. I don't want him to be her. I want him to take the elements of the best of the both of us, which I think is what parenting is. The goal, I think, is for the child to take the best of you and to move forward with it and to keep it evolving and to be able to shave off the party, like with our parents. There's things we didn't agree with our parents. Millie Pete, it was not a saint. But what I focus on and what I remember about her and what is the good stuff, is the things that I did admire about her. And I just kind of slough off the stuff that, I dismiss it to, she did the best she could and she did better than her parents probably did in certain areas because that's how we evolve. Right. So yeah, I have to give credit because I'm in a 2-mother household and my son, so Mother's Day for my son is going to be a big event.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's nice that he is with 2 mothers who have dedicated themselves. And again, 2 older mothers. That's the thing. We're both over 40. And I think that hopefully he will benefit from that because it is, we both do our best by him, which 10, 15, 20 years ago, I don't think we could have said the same thing.
It's so true. There's so much benefit in the wisdom of our age. And I love that. That's why I love talking about this stuff on the Friendzy. I think for me, the mom that I would like to be is a more present mom. And I don't know if any other moms will relate to this, but I don't play as much. They'll be like, Mom, play this. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to play. But I try to be more present. And that's the mom that I would like to be, is the mom that can leave all the other 15 things that I got to do for us for the rest of the night, to get like the laundry done or this finished or the dinner cooked or whatever. I strive to be the mom that can set aside the to-do list and just be present and play.
I think that's a consistent. I think
I
it,
struggle with that. I'm
yeah.
not great at it.
I remember saying, "Mom, just sit down, just sit down, just sit down and be
And
with
it's
us, just
like,
sit down and watch TV." And now I
yeah.
understand why she didn't just sit down and watch
No, you
TV.
can't sit down or else nobody will get fed. Y'all will be starving
Right.
and throwing things at the wall because you'll be hangry in about an hour if I don't
Yeah,
get in there and make dinner,
exactly.
So, but I do want to try to, in the moments that I can, be more present or try to stay a step ahead so that then when I am with my kids, I can be more present. So that's the kind of mom I strive to be. And I also, one other thing is as they get older, because, a lot of our friends listening to the Friendzy have older children that are
Yeah.
teenagers that are going off to college and that sort of thing because they had kids when they were younger. My goal when my kids are that age is to be the mom they can be honest with and to be the mom that's accepting of them and no matter what it is, whether they're coming out of the closet, whether they're confessing that they, have had sex or, or confessing that they made a mistake or did something wrong or want to, explore something that they don't think I would approve of. My goal is that I will be a parent they can be honest with. But I think that's going to be a real challenge.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think I want to be the mom that when my son is older, college and beyond, that he has the same experience that I had, which is I looked forward to going to see my mother. It was my mother never said, and my mother never gave me guilt about visiting her. She would give me a little bit of guilt about calling her when I'd get busy, but I looked forward to the times that I would go to Nashville and see her. And I want my son to think, oh, you know what? I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go see my mom.
Oh, he will. That boy is so head over heels in love with his mama. He will.
Love that
There is
man.
no doubt in my mind, and he's only 6. There is no doubt in my mind he's going to be. You're going to have to make him stay at college. You're going to have to be like, honey, you need to live in your dorm. You need to not come home every weekend to be with me.
I know.
That's going to be your challenge is to kick him out.
Well, he's going to be a mama's boy because he's got 2 mamas. So it's going to be one of us that he's going to be a mama's boy for. So sorry, ladies. I promise I'll be a good mother-in-law, though. I promise. If he marries a woman, I promise.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
And it reminds me of a quick story where a friend of mine who does not have children, who has been around my son, said, "Man, they really do come with their own personalities." And I said, yes, like I think people who don't have children think that they come as this big block of clay and we mold them into who they are, which is not what happens. They come as they are and we have to kind of be the border collie.
I heard someone say they don't belong to us. They just come through us.
Yes. And I believe that. Yes. We have been given the great gift of guiding them. But can you describe a mother's love for her child? And I guess I should say ideal, because I know there's a lot of people listening whose mothers were likely not the great mothers, not the emotional leaders of their families. Like, so I do want to give, because for some, this might be a hard podcast to listen to.
Yeah, Mother's Day can be very hard.
It'd be very hard for people who did not have the mothers that they should have had. So maybe I should change that question to describe a mother who's present, like a mother who is dedicated in her love for her child.
For me, it's so overwhelming. When my kids were little, I was so overwhelmed with love for them and still am to this day that I want to eat them. Isn't that weird? Is that bizarre? It's like I want to nibble their toes. I'm telling you, I'm so obsessed with them. It's such a depth and overwhelming feeling. I've never before becoming a mother been able to say I'd lay down my life for someone else, and I would. It's not even a decision. It's a yes that I'd lay down my life for my kids. And so it's that kind of depth of overwhelming love. And I will tell you that when they were born, I felt a sympathy for my mother that I had never felt before. I was like, oh, this awareness washed over me. This is how you feel about me? Like, oh gosh, I've been such a jerk. I'm so sorry for being 14. And I just wanted to apologize for all the times that I had been unkind to my mother, because then I just felt for my child what she must feel for us. And I thought, whoa, this is overwhelming. And I remember, and it was probably a lot of the hormones, because I'm like nursing and, covered in a pajama full of breast milk and just gross and, just, just
Crusty, a little
oh,
crusty.
crusty and tired. And my hair must have been a hot mess. And I was just crying with my mom, like, I didn't realize you loved us this much. I'm so sorry. I mean, just overwhelming of that awareness of it. And yeah, it's hard to describe that feeling. But I hope that I live it out each day with them. I hope I never forget that overwhelming feeling of love for them. Sometimes on a frustrating day, it only comes when they're asleep. Do you know what you mean? When you gaze at your child when they're sound asleep, you're like, oh, look at that little perfect angel. Look at that perfect little thing. When, 10 minutes before that, you were like, brush your teeth and go to bed.
Why do I have to tell you? How many times should I tell you? How many times have I told you? Da, da, da. Yes.
Now, what about you? Are there ways to define a mother's love in words?
Well, and I think of my friend and I think of those who don't have children, and I think that this should be poignant for them for exactly what you just said. What we're describing is not necessarily something that everybody is supposed to experience themselves with their children, because not everybody's meant to be a parent, which I think is okay.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
but I think that they should understand what you just said. Like, if you're not a parent, you should understand that how much your mother loved you, whether you realized it or not. I think for me,
Or whether she was good at it or not.
yeah. And so I think that if your mother was not good at it, then she was worried about other people. I honestly think that. If she was not a good mother, I think that your mother was focused on something else that was bothering them. And if your mother was an addict, obviously that's an easy to define thing but that's not the source. Being an addict, something else, but something that they went through caused them not to be a good mother. And they couldn't get up from out of it. I think for me, like you said, it's hard to describe because it's such a sharp curve that you take. And I think that you can't dismiss, I'm not a big proponent for saying, nature. I think so much of what we are and who we are is nurture. I think nature is very little of who we are. But when it comes to a mother's love for her child, I think that is absolutely nature, because that's how the child survives. Katie once said to me that she truly believes that the reason babies are so fun to look at and to interact with, whether you're a mom or not. You see a baby on the street, a lot of people are like, they smile. Whether you interact with them, you smile. And Katie's theory is because that's nature's way of making sure you take care of it. Whether you're the parent or not, that you have this instinct to take care of that vulnerable thing, and nature provided that. And then her theory is when they're a teenager and they start stinking and they kind of awkward looking and they're kind of weird looking and they act, like an ass. And then she's like, that's nature's way of telling you it's time for them to learn to be independent so that they're fully prepared by the time they're an adult. So yeah, Katie has a very wise way of looking at that. And I agree with her. It wasn't until she said that to me, it's very, very wise. And so I think it's nature gift, because I had no plan to be a mother. And Katie was the big influence on that. She still says it's the best idea I ever had. And I agree with her. And once Mr. Carter was born, I was scared to death, but it was instantaneous. It was God or source or universe or whatever it is that controls nature. Just, it's like you were assigned to make sure that this baby survives. And through that love is how you do it. And it is you can't describe it. And it's like Jen said, I would lay down my life easily for my son without hesitation. And I have never felt that before. So yes, I think it's a magical feeling. And if you're a mother and you have lost the sense of that, then it's my encouragement to just, as a wise older woman, whether your children are grown or still little, is to get back in touch with what your ultimate job is. And that job is to make sure you have been assigned that child, to make sure that that child survives. And that's, to me, emotionally and physically. And, whatever's going on in your life, that's the thing, is like, I, the mama bear thing is real. Like, I will fight you. I didn't understand my ability to kill someone else until I had my son. I would have no remorse in taking another's life, not only giving mine, but taking another's to protect my child. That is an absolute.
That is fierce right there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So true. I mean, I'm going to have a hard time when my girls get to middle school and those middle school girls are mean. Middle school girls can be mean to each other. I'm like, not looking forward to that time at all.
I've told Katie many times that the first girl that breaks our son's heart.
Oh,
it's like, if we know their parents, then we're going to have to really just, just zen out. And the same, I mean, he's going to break somebody's heart too, but I'm like, he's my little, my man, it's going to be hard. It's hard. And that's where that comes from. But I also think that, another danger that I will give as a warning to women is that you have to let go, though. It's your job that for them to be an adult, you have to let go. And I did not have parents who micromanaged me, and I did not have helicopter parents. I did not have parents that guilted me. My mother and father gave me incredible freedom, and I took those opportunities. I was not a rebellious kid because I didn't have somebody on top of me, So I think rebellion comes from the parents who, like I said, with my mother, her relationship with my siblings different than her relationship with me. And because her mothering was different, her style was different, and the outcome was different. And I think she recognized that and changed that. And I think that you have to be very careful to be too imposing on your adult children. I have seen firsthand with friends whose mothers want them to call them every day. They're calling every day. They're wanting to know where they are. They're adult children. And if this resonates with you, it's a terrible thing to experience. So yes, I think that, again, this just remember who you are and what your job is, and just enjoy it, and enjoy, like, I have to enjoy Mr. Carter being in the world without talking to me for months. If it's he only sees me at Christmas, I have to be the mother that's okay with that, because guess what? I got my son to adulthood, and that was my job. And I'm telling myself this now because I know it's hard, but it's in
Ain't
his
no way
best
that's
interest.
gonna happen. Ain't no way Mr. Carter is gonna be all up on you. I'm telling you, you're gonna have to, like, strap him to his dorm room in college and say, you don't get a car if you come home. You have to stay here and experience college. You have to leave him there stranded, or else he's gonna be home. I'm telling you,
he's in love with me at
sweet.
6, but
that sweet friendship will always continue. And I know that is in big part because of your relationship with your mom, and that sweet friendship that does continue. So at this time, I would like to say we'd like to dedicate this episode of The Friendzy to Mildred Carter, who passed at the age of 91 in 2020.
Yeah. On her birthday, which I thought was very cool.
Which is so cool. She came in and came out on the same day. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, we wish that she were here with us on this Mother's Day, but we know that we will meet her again. And I look forward to the day that she gets to welcome us home.
Me too. And I will say that for those who don't have your mothers, like I've handled it pretty well, again, because of Millie Pete. Like, she was no frills. Like, death is a part of life. I learned that in elementary school. Like, and here's a funny story. So we were from old Kentucky, southern. I mean, I grew up in Tennessee, but my whole family's in Kentucky, and they're the ones that at a funeral, it's open casket, you go touch the body, and I'm like, and I could never touch a body. When my father passed, I couldn't touch his body. I couldn't. Mom's like stroking his cheek and fixing his hair and everything, and I couldn't do it. And so I always tease. I said, well, I'm going to have to with my mother because she will expect nothing less. And so during the pandemic, unfortunately, like I said, like you mentioned, she passed and we couldn't have a funeral. And so we were like, but we want to have something when the time is right. So we cremated her. And then we'll ask for forgiveness later because that's not what she wanted. But of course, then she never could imagine a pandemic is when she passed. So anyway, I got out of it. So I got out of having to
You
touch
didn't
the
have
body.
to. Yeah.
So, and then she could be the very one who decided to go when she went knowing, I won't make Melissa have to do, because I can tell you, I don't know what the future holds after death. I don't know what that's like. Nobody does. Nobody has the answer. No matter what spirituality you are, nobody knows if they have it right.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got it right or everybody's got it wrong, but the truth is the truth whenever we figure it out. As Betty White calls it, the secret. Every time a friend of hers passes, she says, well, now they know the secret. Mm-hmm. So I thought Mom knows the secret now. But I can guarantee you that if there's a way for me to do something for my son beyond my death, I will absolutely do it. And like you mentioned, like I fully expect to know when it's my time, when I see my mom again, come get me. Mm-hmm. And and when she passed, my son, he at 6 years old had to deal with his grandmother's death, and he was 5 at the time. And I said, I was very pragmatic, very no frills about death, and talk to him about it. And so, yeah, we had the discussion, and he wants me to come back and get him when it's his time. So I fully believe that. And I see a cardinal started showing up on my back deck after she passed. And every so often the cardinal comes, and I absolutely think that that's Mom coming to say hi. So I miss her. I cried the other day because I had a hard day as a mom, and I missed being reassured by her. Because the other thing, you talk about a mother's love for her child, like you talk about Nan, there's nobody in my life who could reassure me like my mother. Mm-hmm. And she's no longer here to do that. And so I broke down just a few days ago because I thought I really don't have her to call because I know that she would be the first to say, you're doing a great job. Yeah. And that boy loves you. But I didn't have that. And that's okay. But it also, again, was the opportunity to remind me that that's what you are as a mother, as you should be. I think you should be. I think you have to discipline your kids, but you have to remember, for me to be 51 and break down because I don't have my mom to reassure me, that's the type of mother I want to be. I don't want my son to be upset all the time, but I also would love for when I pass for my son to just have a moment where he stops and reflects on me, because that's what it feels like to not have your mother. It's like a punch in the chest. You have to remind yourself. I have to remind myself that Mom is gone. Mm-hmm. It's so unnatural. And I had the same feeling when my father passed, but it is truly unnatural. And it makes you literally stop walking. You just stop because it's hard to describe that absence, but that's a good thing. That means she was a great mom and she was my hero. So thank you for dedicating this episode to Mom. And she loved you, and she was so impressed by you. And she was.
Yeah, I expect to see Dee Dee and Millie Pete welcoming me home. I mean, if she's not there, tell her I'm going to give her a tardy slip, because exactly. I'm telling you, I really do. Your mother was so loving and kind, wise and creative, and just the most supportive woman. And I'm so grateful that I got to know her, and I'm so grateful she was your mom.
Yeah, me too. I was
what a lucky kid. You won the parent lottery, you really did. And wow. I'm so
Nan will have to adopt.
Thankful.
I'll take Nan any day.
Oh,
So she'll have
yeah.
to adopt me.
Nanny's in. Yeah, she loves you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll have to call her when I need reassurance.
She will do it. She will do it. See, these are the kind of conversations that we have here on the Friendzy.
Yeah.
It's about real stories connecting real women. There's enough out there to tell you who you should be, who you should have been, who you ought to be in the future. We're just about being real with what's going on in our lives right now in this moment so that we can connect with you and so that you know you're not alone. You're not.
Right.
We're in this
Right.
together. And that's what the Friendzy is all about. So if we can, let's switch gears for our pep talk for this week.
No, let's laugh a little bit. We've been crying all day.
Okay, we think we've got a way to end our Mother's Day episode on a high note and just let you relax and let go of some of this guilt, right?
Yes. So yeah, we talked about how the influence of our mothers on us and what kind of mothers we want to be. But like I mentioned, Millie Pete had an incredible amount of mom guilt. I'm sure most of our mothers did and do, but I know that you do. As a current mother, I know that you feel alone in this, and you feel, especially on social media, when everybody's posting these wonderful pictures of their families and everything is great, but they're not showing you the behind the scenes of getting those kids dressed or getting the, whatever. Yeah. And so everybody's got some mom guilt. So we're going to alleviate that right now because you're doing great compared to what you had to do when you were a kid.
Yeah. So your mirror mantra for this week is drop the mom guilt, just let it go. And here's why. Because back in the day, being a mom versus today being a mom is a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
Melissa, let's share some examples.
Sure. So Millie Pete had a big, and Dad too, but they had this big pole with a bell on the top of it. And so when I got home from school, it was, bye, Felicia. Go play in the neighborhood with the neighborhood kids. I was on a bike all the time. I was walking and I was by myself. I didn't have a sibling. And I was like going however far to get to my friend's house by myself. And don't come home until we ring the bell, which was about the same time as the street lights going out. But when I'd hear the bell ring, it was dinner time. So between school and dinner, I was on my own, and there was my mother and father were not outside looking to see where I was. No. I was gone.
They were not carpooling you to 15 different activities.
No.
They said, get outside. Bye.
Get outside. That's it. And you're on your own. Nobody was watching me. And I didn't have a cell phone.
Now today, Melissa Carter, as a mother, would you ever just send your son out the front door and say, come back when I ring the bell?
No, absolutely not. I mean, you talk about all these activities. We structure those activities so that he's with other kids in a structured environment with adult supervision.
At all times.
At all times.
Okay. So here we go. Back in the day versus now. Back in the day, my parents had a big conversion van, and it was Florida State Seminole colors. I'll never forget. Garnet and gold van, huge. The back of it would flop down like a bed. You know what we did on road trips? My parents said, get in the back. And we drove 5.5 hours while we played. We built forts. We crawled all around.
Did you have I'm sorry. Did you have a seatbelt on?
No seatbelts. And now my kids got to have an 18-point harness and strapped in like they're going on a damn roller coaster in order to drive down the straight.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Yes. So back then, it was way easier to be a parent than it is now. You got another one?
Just to tag on that really quickly.
Yeah.
So I was sitting in the front seat without a seatbelt on by 4 years old.
While they're smoking cigarettes with the windows up.
My son still, like you said, in the back, strapped in, probably till he's 8.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, I was already in the front seat, probably leaning.
He can't even reach his own knees. He's so strapped in.
And then probably leaning into the dashboard, looking up at the sky.
He's trapped. He's like, Mom, I must only look forward, shoulders back.
Exactly. Yeah, in like a NASCAR seat with the things on the side.
That's next. In the next generation, they're gonna have to wear helmets in the car. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. So
back then versus now.
Back then, my son is 6 years old, and back then, when I was 6 years old, one of my jobs was to clean out the ashtrays of my parents. So I was working with ash and tobacco, and even when my parents were smoking, there would be the haze of the smoke in the
cigarette
air,
smoke.
and I would run through it just to see it curl and swirl. So you talk about secondhand smoke. I was swimming in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That
And
was
today
normal.
I have air filters in every room in the
Yeah.
house because I'm concerned about the pet dander.
Of course. Like the pet dander gonna kill him. And
Yes.
you grew up with the
I grew up with
cigarette
secondhand smoke. Just, I mean, I
clouds.
smelled like, yes, and I bet if I blew my nose, there'd be gray. Come on now.
You got the filters in your house, and at night I've got essential oil diffusers in my kids' rooms, and I gotta choose what their mood is and what essential oil is going to soothe them to sleep. Will it be lavender or thieves, or will it be the root of a squawking hawk that will make them? What are we doing? I have to pick an essential oil for their mood before they go to bed at night. What?
I didn't
Our
realize you were
parents said
customizing the
good
essential
night
oils.
and shut off the light and said, "Good luck with the monster in the closet."
Yeah.
I mean, we make it so much harder on ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
So drop the mom guilt.
Drop the mom guilt. I have another one. Do you have another one?
Go. Yes.
All right.
Go. I want to hear it.
So when I was my son's age, I was living on a diet of McDonald's, Pizza Hut, and Captain D's. Captain D's and Shoney's after church was the big delight. But now, things are gluten-free and there's plenty of fruits and vegetables and,
yes.
and some low FODMAP stuff. And, yes. And
It better not have red dye in it. It better not have sugar, sucrose, fructose, glucose. All those are nasty words.
Exactly. And I remember when I was old enough, and a lot of our listeners old enough to remember when the 2-liter Coke bottles, they first were glass, and then it was a big revolutionary thing for them to become in the big plastic things. And the commercial was that you dropped it and it bounced off the floor, unlike the glass that would shatter. So I would just drop it and drop it. But
healthy. That makes it healthy for you.
And Diet Coke didn't come out till I was in high school. So I was raised on full Coke.
Coca-Cola.
With all these things.
That's what my family would have called it, a Coca-Cola.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got to worry about, it's
a special occasion if my son ever gets a Coke, and it's usually at his grandmother's house.
Yeah.
So,
our kids are allowed to have like purified organic milk that comes from the goats in the Swiss Alps. And they are only allowed to have the most purified water that's not only been filtered before it got in, then it gets filtered again before it gets into their precious water bottles, and God forbid if you serve it to them in plastic, then you're going to hell.
Well, and and it has to be grass-fed cows for the milk.
Duh. I mean, what else could it be?
And it can't be whole milk.
Oh, Melissa. That's just offensive. I mean, ladies, let's remind ourselves what happened a generation ago or 2 generations ago versus what is happening now. And you can just go ahead and drop the mom guilt. They're going to be okay. They will.
We are overthinking it. Your children will be just fine.
They will. Will. I got friends that you would not even believe the bills that they spend in therapy. And I'm like, therapy? How old
for themselves or for their kid?
Oh, for their kids. For their kids. It's extensive and expensive, and I think we all turned out pretty okay.
Yeah, raising a son, I will say that, because a lot of people say, well, that we're just weak in it. We're weak now. We're weak because we do all these things. I do think we overthink things. I do think that you have to have adversity on some level in order to know who you are. But I do think that the compassion and the idea of not being so blatantly an asshole is something that I do like better now than back then. Because that's one thing I would not, the fact that your fathers were not allowed to be emotional with their children, that was not, society didn't.
Sure.
And I think that, is something that I would not have back. The fact that the mothers were expected to do all the housework while the fathers just worked. And, I don't want that, even though that some women structure their house that way and then get stressed out, but it's a choice now. It's not expected now, right? So there are some things, but yes, when it comes to being a mother, I think that you have to understand that you're above and beyond, as my
Like,
son's kindergarten teacher would say. You're going above and beyond.
they don't have to have the bath oil that has been purified from roses in order to take their organic bath every night. Throw them a bar of soap and they're going to be all
Yeah,
right.
that's right. Dial soap. We had
Throw them a bar of soap.
I was raised on Dial, which will, I mean, I'm surprised I don't look like a crocodile now because that stuff will dry you out. But it was a bar of Dial soap.
Of course
Good
it
luck.
was.
Yes. All right. So if you subscribe to the Friendzy yet, listen to everything we've shared with you. These are real stories by real women, and we would love for you to subscribe if this is your first time listening to us. And we'd also like you to leave a review because unfortunately we don't get to have you call us. We can't have a line for you to call us and talk to us. I wish, but a review is the best way for us to understand what you like about us and what you'd like to see different about us. You can also sign up for our weekly email, because we will send the new episode to you every single Monday when it's fresh, ready to go. I don't know if the kids say this is dropping on Mondays,
Drops
but
on Monday.
We'll send it to you straight to your inbox, and we promise not to bug the crap out of you. It's just that one email per week to catch you up on what's going on. All you got to do is subscribe at thefriendzy.com.
If there is a friend of yours you think would enjoy this episode, please share this with her. Plus, we'd love for you to check out our brand new YouTube channel. It's live with videos and extended interviews. If you like the show, you could also share about it on your social media. Tag us at The Friendzy, and that way we can share it as well.
That's right. And we'd like to thank listeners who have subscribed to our email list at thefriendzy.com. They are Melanie Zimmerman, Jen Hopkins, and Candace Mayo. They did not know, or they didn't solicit, or rather for us to do that. They don't know that we're calling them out because we pay attention. So we want to thank Melanie, Jen, and Candace. We appreciate it.
Soundtrack produced by Tammy Hurt for Placement Music, written and recorded by Placement Music creative team member Mark Daniels, and the Friendzy podcast is produced by Bo Johnson.
The Friendzy's graphic design is by Helen Vickers and web design by Caden Jacobs.
These are real stories by real women. We're sitting right in front of you, bearing ourselves to you each and every week and enjoying every minute of it. So thank you so much for your time, because we know that there is a lot of demands on it. So the fact that you are hanging out with me and Melissa each week just means the world to us. So go share your stories with the world.
Until next week, trust your gut,
share your story, and
stop lying about your age. Yay! We'll see you next week.